Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host Bill DeFilippo, joined today by my co-host Matt Filipovitz. Matt, what's going on?
Bill, Penn State is 1-0. The first college football Saturday is in the books. And at time of recording, there's still more football to watch this weekend. So I am doing maybe the best I've ever been to start a podcast.
Yeah, Matt, you and I were talking about this before we came on, but this happens to me every single week one of the college football season, but I forget just how much joy I get out of being able to park it on the couch at 11:59. It was a little bit earlier today because Manchester City had a game at 10. But being able to park into the couch at 11:59 and just cruise through a Saturday, I always forget how much fun that was. And I don't know about you, but just getting a day to be able to do nothing but watch college football, it really is the best thing.
It was such a bummer. The afternoon slate was kind of butt. The nooners were great.
Yeah.
There were some banger nooners. TCU Colorado had a great time. It was fun to watch Iowa anxiety set in the second half. That was enjoyable for me. But the afternoon slate kind of hit a little bit of a lull, but those night games brought us right back up.
Yeah, Iowa behind schedule on the drive to 25 points per game. They scored 24 against the worst defense they're going to play all season.
But very important, Bill. Iowa's offense technically higher scoring than Ohio State's, so keep that in mind.
And a lot higher scoring than Northwestern.
That's true.
I'm going to just put this out here before we start the pod. Northwestern is the worst team in P5. They
that's not
are.
A debate.
No one looks like they want to be there. I actually said, you're the wrong person for me to tell this to. I said to a coworker that if not for the fact that I am going to Boston the weekend before, I would be in Evanston for that game because that is going to be disgusting. But we're not here to talk about that game. We're not here to talk about Penn State against Northwestern yet. We'll do that in a few weeks. Today we're here to talk about Penn State's win against the West Virginia Mountaineers, the Nittany Lions, which 1-0 on the season with a 38-15 win over WVU. And Matt, before we start getting into anything else, I just want to say that game was a blast. And despite the fact that it was 14-7 at halftime, Penn State missed a couple of kicks, which, kind of an agonizing way to leave points on the field. They look good, but not perfect, nothing that sort of thing. At no point did I ever feel as a person with a vested interest in watching Penn State win that game, West Virginia had a chance to really take it to them.
No, it was. It felt like. Do you remember the Buffalo game a couple years back, where I think Penn State went into the half trailing 10-7 to Buffalo? I get, Penn State never really trailed in this game, but it felt similar vibes to that, where I knew Penn State eventually was going to pull away and come out with a W. And that's exactly what happened. And I was trying to figure out why I felt so confident. Because, theoretically, first-time starter, the defense played pretty good, but not excellent. Garrett Green, the West Virginia quarterback, is a playmaker. That dude was fun to watch. And I was trying to put my finger on why I felt so confident. And then I'm like, well, Penn State is, I think, one of two teams in the country, don't quote me on this, to start the last 4 seasons against a Power 5 opponent. So Penn State's been here before in opening games each of the last 4 seasons now, 3 seasons and then this one. So, Penn State's been in this ringer where they've been in these close games to kick things off. So they've had experience working through it. And I don't know if that's why I felt so confident, but it was really nice that I think Penn State legitimately learned a lot about itself. But I never really felt threatened, and it wasn't just a cupcake game. I think it was just a really, really, really great week 1 for Penn State, and it ended about as perfectly as I could have hoped for.
Yeah, it ended up not being quite as emphatic, but you compared it to that Buffalo game, and I think that's a good comp. I actually compared it to the 2018 game that Penn State played against Pitt. That was the game Penn State went on to win 51-6, but people remember that game. Penn State went in 51-6.
Oh, okay.
It was rather emphatic. But yeah, Penn State went into the locker room that day. It was 14-6 at halftime. Penn State was clearly better than Pitt was at football, but they just couldn't quite impose themselves in the way that you would have wanted them to in that first half. And then, they came out, they really steamrolled Pitt in that second half. They scored 37 points in the second half. Penn State scored 38 points in this entire game. But that was just kind of my comp for me, where going into the locker room at halftime, let me ask you this before we dive into offense, defense, that sort of thing. Going into the locker room at halftime, did you feel like there was anything that Penn State was doing, not doing, etc., that really had you concerned or made you think, if we get to the fourth quarter and it's 21-14 and West Virginia is driving, it'll be because of this thing, of this thing, of this thing? Or the entire time, did you think, week one, they're cruising, I'm not concerned about any of this?
So, a little bit of a double-edged sword here. The missed kicks, of course, that I was like, this is going to come back to haunt them, or this could come back to haunt them. I never really felt like the game was going to get out of hand against Penn State. So the kicks were a concern. But I felt really confident that Penn State was going to get control because of what happened in the last minute and a half before halftime. And I talked to you about this a little bit in our Slack this morning. Penn State, with a first-time starting quarterback and no timeouts, orchestrated a beautiful 2-minute drive. And, they came away with no points because, unfortunately, Sanders Haydick missed a chip shot. But that's a scoring drive to me for the offense. The special teams were the ones who didn't put points on that board, but the offense went out there with no timeouts and a first-time starting quarterback, moved the ball. The play calling was great. It was efficient. That little screen pass to Liam Clifford where he just makes a beeline for the sideline, that's awareness that I was worried we weren't going to have out of these younger receivers. They went out there and they kept on making plays, and Allar looked in control. So when I saw they were able to do that in a 2-minute offense, I was like, okay, they're going to come out of halftime and they're going to look even sharper. And I think they did coming out of halftime. And that's when I really just felt like, I know we'll get more, granular on the offense and the defense in a little bit, but after that drive, even though they didn't come away with any points, seeing the offense be able to do that, again, with no timeouts, really confirmed to me that this Penn State offense is just built a little bit different than we're used to.
Yeah, and I immediately thought of how many games I had seen that day, that weekend, whatever, where the ones where there are blowouts, it's against FCS teams. It's against G5 teams. It's against teams that are physically overmatched in every single regard. And then I went through and I was thinking okay, yeah, Utah beat Florida, but Utah only won that game by 13 points. They were up 17-3 at halftime. Florida was a joke, don't get me wrong, but it's not like Utah went out there and just ran them off the field. Ohio State really struggled with Indiana. You look at a team obviously TCU ends up losing to Colorado, a little bit different, but even North Carolina, they went into halftime against South Carolina 17-14. It's not always easy in week one, especially when you are going up against a Power 5 team. And we'll talk about this probably more when we talk about Penn State's defense, but West Virginia is the kind of Power 5 team that the way they were built really tested what we thought on the defensive side of the football might have been Penn State's weaknesses, and did test 100%. Them to a little bit. Yeah. But because of Penn State's offense, it ended up really not mattering. And we'll start there, Matt. Penn State, again, 38 points on the afternoon, 27 first downs, a little bit rough on third down, went 3 for 9, but 478 yards total offense, 332 yards passing, 11.1 yards per pass, 146 rushing yards. Didn't turn the ball over despite Drew Allar coming real close a couple of times and turning the ball over. But generally, we're going to start with what stood out with Penn State's offense. And, we have to start with Drew Allar, who outside of, I thought, from a couple of mistakes that are all really easy to fix, I would say, was, he could not have played much better in his first game as Penn State's starting quarterback.
No, he really could not have. First things first, I think Neil Brown's defense and West Virginia defense went in there, doing the best game plan they could possibly do, and that was to play cover zero. You know what Singleton and Allen can do. You want to try to limit the damage they're able to do running between the tackles. I get why they ran a lot of cover zero because, again, questionable receivers, first-time starter, that's a gamble you take 100 times out of 100. The problem is Penn State was ready for it. Drew Allar was ready for it. That was the most impressive performance by a first-time starter I think I've seen in a long, long, long time. I've been saying for a year that Allar is a different level of quarterback, and he showed it. He stepped up in the pocket beautifully. He read things beautifully. When he got, pushed from the pocket and had to throw off platform, it never felt like he made any kind of throw that put the ball in danger. He threw across his body, sure, but it was to where nobody else was except for his receiver. I think there's an over route to Harrison Wallace that's the perfect example of it. This was just a fantastic performance. And, of course, the interceptable balls that were intercepted are definitely a problem, yes. When that slant to Keandre Lambert-Smith that I think it's a little bit on both guys, that was just a good blitz by West Virginia to get him off rhythm. You want to work that stuff out. But overall, I mean, Allar, I have the numbers pulled up. 43% of his completions were over 15 yards. That's insane. Pushing the ball downfield like that is something we would always see in like the Jomo offenses. And now it feels like they're able to do that on a regular basis. And if you listen to our preview podcast, I did think that they were going to try to let Allar throw a ton and take some shots on some inexperienced West Virginia corners. And I'm glad that they did that. I just didn't expect it to look that effortless for Drew Allar for a lot of this game. He looked confident. He was checking plays at the line. There were he was throwing guys open. Those deep curls that they ran a ton of, especially to Malik McClain a couple of times. I don't remember seeing that in the playbook last year. They ran a lot of 6-yard hitches, but those 12-yard and back curls looked pretty new to me. At least I can't remember them running too many of them last year. So there's all of these new elements this level of quarterback gives you. And I know West Virginia secondary is not great and maybe one of the worst Penn State's going to see all year, but you can only be encouraged by what we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, it felt to me like they wanted to use this game to let Drew Allar and the wide receiver corps build up a bit of confidence. I mean, if you told me going into this game that Nick Singleton and Katron Allen were going to combine for 23 carries, 121 yards, and 1 touchdown, I would have been pretty surprised by that because it seems like the way that you kind of help a guy, or at least going into the game, it seemed like to me the way you help out a guy like Allar is you hold his hand, you walk him through this first game, you basically say, we know what works, we know what we have, we use those kind of known commodities to help you so that a little bit farther down the road, you are the best possible version of yourself. And what I didn't consider was that they dropped him and they dropped the wide receivers into kind of the perfect situation to let them go out there and play a game very focused around them and getting the best out of them and building up their confidence. Allar, I thought, was very, very good. You mentioned a couple of mistakes here and there. There was that tip pass in the first half that probably should have been an interception. There was that throw to Keandre Lambert-Smith in the end zone that, again, could have been an interception. Lambert-Smith, Keandre actually did such a good job breaking that pass up that if you go back and watch, he actually did waving his arms thing like a cornerback
that had me
does.
dying. That's unbelievable sicko wide receiver brain that I got to shift into a corner now. I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, and there was the pressure that made him miss Keandre Lambert-Smith on that slant that would have been 6. Like you mentioned, Keandre probably still should catch that and then fall down and, catch that fall down and not worry about trying to make a play so you can get up, turn upfield, and have another big touchdown. Still, Allar, you get that a little bit high. I think the pressure did kind of get him in that moment. And then there was the pass that Trey Wallace dropped that would have been a touchdown where, you put it in a little bit of a different spot so he doesn't have to turn around, go back a little bit of an awkward spot. But
real quick, that was pretty play design in the red zone. That was Theo Johnson out there.
Beautiful.
And then Trey Wallace was one-on-one against probably some poor safety, and I'm taking Trey Wallace to win that battle. That was really well set up. I really like that play.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I just listed his 4 kind of big mistakes, quote-unquote big mistakes. one, he didn't make any other ones,
Right.
which is like gigantic. And two, none of those were things that hurt Penn State in this game in like a really bad way, and aren't the sorts of things that I think are like going to be a concern as the season goes along.
No.
And when you put that stuff together, obviously consistency is going to be important. We need to see him do that more frequently.
Yep.
Obviously, being able to do that on the road, being able to do that against better D, all those things are stuff that we still need to see. And after last night, I think we should all be optimistic we are going to see.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt, this game was about building a foundation to build on for the rest of the season. And I think when you look at it like that, that last night could not have gone any better for Drew Allar and Penn State's passing game.
Yeah, and you know the wild part is I think the tight ends combined for one catch, which is I thought that was going to be such a big part of this offense. And again, this is just very clearly the West Virginia defense. And again, it's a really sound strategy and concept. I get why they did it. Tried to eliminate Penn State's biggest assets, which are, of course, the running back and the tight ends. And the receivers are up to the challenge. And I think this makes every defensive coordinator look at Penn State differently. And that's exciting. Like, I'm excited to see what teams try to attack them with now that they know Drew Allar can beat you over the top. This is just a really great stepping stone, and I'm excited. There's going to absolutely be a game where Allar goes like 11 for 24, and Penn State's still able to win because Singleton and Allen are now, able to break free more without there being guys in the box and cover zero. This is just going to be a great launching point for this passing attack. Again, the running game didn't have to do much, and I actually really like that. Like, I like the fact that Allen and Singleton didn't have to do much in a season opener against an overmatched opponent. I hope it's the exact same thing next week against Delaware. It's just keeping guys fresh, adding new elements to this offense, and giving defensive coordinators more to think about going into every single week.
What was your favorite throw that Allar made on the day? Was it one of the touchdowns, or was it something different?
I'll be honest, the Cephas out route that he dropped, that was pretty. Like, that's 6 if he catches that. I like that play a lot. The first Lambert Smith touchdown, I was at a bar in Chicago with a friend of the show on Keat, which was a ton of fun. And some guy had a trombone in the bar, and he was like playing like the fight song, and nobody knew he had the trombone. And then he just pulled it out from underneath a table. Dude, do you know how jarring it is? You're so hyped up, like, first touchdown of the season, it's the Drew Allar era, and then just some bro pulls out a trombone in a bar. Everybody lost their minds. So that one is very important to me. And the Trey Wallace one, where Allar's rolling to his right, and then Trey works his way across the field, and Allar pretty much puts it on the money. That was also very nice.
I'm fascinated in the thought of someone sneaking a trombone into a bar. I feel like of all the instruments, that is probably the most difficult to get in relatively incognito. But yeah, like
I'll send you a video
the
of it,
touchdown.
It's pretty impressive.
Yes, please. So obviously the touchdown to Lambert Smith, steps up in the pocket, throws it 40, 45 yards on a rope, and Keandre just snags it. I loved, it was in the second quarter, it's a third down. He rolls to his right, and this is one of the receptions to Lambert Smith. Face of pressure, throws it across his body, and it's just a dot that Lambert Smith was able to bring. And it was one of those reminders that, like, this guy has arm talent that you don't normally see. Mm-hmm. And it helped him, and obviously it helped Penn State's wide receivers build up confidence. I agree with you. I don't want to talk too much about the running backs. I don't want to talk too much about the tight ends. I think Penn State just kind of let them be passengers in this game, knowing what they have in it. But in their wide receivers, what did you think of the performance by Keandre Lambert Smith, Trey Wallace, Malik McClain, the various guys who were able to get some run out there?
It put a lot of things at ease. Like, we all knew Keandre Lambert Smith had this big play ability. He flashed it. To watch him go out there, and, I know he had the drop that people are going to think about, but that's like the 5th most interesting thing about Keandre Lambert Smith's game to me on Saturday. He did so many other things really well. He worked to space. He caught with his hands. He just did a really good job of being the big play down the field threat. Malik McClain, I did not expect really to play that much in this game.
Yeah.
I did not see that coming at all. And to see him go out there and be that, first of all, it was insane to me that on his touchdown, it's 3rd and 6. Penn State has already missed kicks or it might have been fourth down. Whatever.
Yeah.
What was it? Third.
It was third down. It was third down.
It was third down. Penn State already missed kicks. West Virginia's playing soft coverage. Like, the odds are simply that, like, Penn State's probably going to go for it on fourth down if they don't get it. And for, Malik McClain just to find space and then bounce off guys and score from 25 yards out, that was the defense giving them something and the receiver recognizing it and then taking it to the house. That's a big-time play. I really like that kind of stuff. Trey Wallace, he's still my pick to lead this team in receiving touchdowns. I think he had a very quiet, 70-something odd yards? I have the stats pulled up in front of me.
Seven receptions, 72 yards, as long as 18 yards, 10.3 yards per reception.
Yeah, and caught 7 of his 8 targets. That's, for your number 2 guy, that's a fantastic day at the office. Again, the Liam Clifford screen, I think that was a really nice play. Liam Clifford respectfully runs like he's in slow motion. It's a different level of athlete. I get it. But him working like that, I think Cephas, it was a little bit of a bobbling catch. I want to see him catch that ball with his hands if you go back and watch it. But for his first Power 5 action, as a Power 5 football player, solid day at the office. There's just a lot to like about what that group can do. Amari Evans didn't even play on offense because it looked like he was questionable according to the Big Ten availability report. There's another guy who's going to come in. I think Caden Saunders is still going to have a role in this thing. Everything is just firing for these receivers, and that's just a major tip of the cap to Marcus Higgins. He got that room ready really quickly, and really, I think I'm not concerned about them anymore, like at all. I think enough guys made enough plays to where I'm not worried anymore.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I want to see them against Iowa specifically because I think that, they have laid down a really good foundation. They're going to build up on it over the next 3 weeks or whatever it is before they get into that Iowa game against a legitimately excellent Iowa secondary. Yep. And sometimes it's just about confidence with this stuff. I mean, Lambert Smith specifically is the guy where confidence has kind of been the key thing for him for years. But Lambert Smith had a good game. Trey Wallace had a really good game. And then the line from Penn State, and James Franklin even mentioned this after the game, they feel really good about their top 2 guys, and then it's everybody else that they're kind of worried about. Might not be the right word, but it's everybody else that makes them go, all right, we want to see what we have. We want to see someone consistently do it, blah, blah, blah. 3 wide receivers caught passes from Drew Allar, who weren't Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace. That was Malik McClain, that was Liam Clifford, that's Dante Cephas. One other wide receiver, Malik Mega, caught a pass from Bo Prabula when he got into the game. But those 3 guys, McClain, Clifford, and Cephas, 7 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown.
You'll take that.
If you combined that all into one guy, that means Penn State's top 3 receivers would have gone for 4, 123 and 2, 7, 105 and a touchdown, 7 and 72. And you hear that and go, that's like exactly what I want out of my wide receiver room. Yep. If I am Penn State, if we are going to have 3 guys. Instead, they have their 2 and then a group of guys they spread it around to. Again, now it's about consistency. Now it's about building onto it. They did a really good job getting open. Aller did a really good job getting them the football. I think through one game, that's about as good as we could feel about the wide receivers as possible. Matt, are there any areas of concern anywhere on the offense that popped up in their game against West Virginia? Or are you just generally like, yeah, that was about as good of a football game as that offense could have played?
Northside's got to get the snaps down. I think that's week 1 stuff. I'm not really worried about that. JB Nelson played really well. He plays mean. Like, that dude's mean, which was cool to see. But, like, overall, I'm just not – I don't want to get overconfident because this could come back to, bite Penn State in the ass a little bit if they get complacent. And I'm sure they won't be. I'm sure Franklin and Yurcich understand what they have in front of them. But, again, this was a really, really awesome performance for a first-time starter. I think if Sahadak makes those 2 kicks, I feel like if they would have cleared that 40-point threshold, the general consensus would be that it was like a near flawless game, as opposed to, I think a lot of people are viewing it as that was just a really good game. And I get it. Like, I understand that reasoning, but offensively, Penn State played about as well as I could hope for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Norzad. He has to get those snaps down. Unfortunately, Allar's 6'5", when he puts his arms in the air. He's like 8.5 feet tall, probably. I thought the offensive line in general, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. I thought they had an okay game. I think West Virginia brought a lot of pressure trying, because they knew new center, new quarterback were going to bring things and try and show them things that you can only get used to with game reps. And I think that there were some times where Allar's mobility bailed them out a little bit. I think he only got sacked. Yeah, he only got sacked one time in the game. That's great. Like, you take one sack a game every single day of the week. Yep. But I thought the offensive line did okay. I think there is a lot of room for them to get better. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Matt, I think week one, when you are playing as a unit of 5 guys, you are going to be more susceptible than just about anywhere else on offense at having lapses, at having one thing go wrong that leads to another thing go wrong. I think they played okay. I think there was a lot of stuff like miscommunications and not totally understanding things. But I think the encouraging sign comes from it's all stuff that I think can be ironed out. What do you say?
I think they played pretty well. I actually really liked what I saw out of them. The pocket never on the non-design plays where Allar was supposed to roll out, the pocket never collapsed. It just moved, and Allar felt it and stepped up in that. Like, the offensive line was able to clear enough space for Allar to step up into throws and connect, and that's really all you can ask for. Again, it's the first game. There's always going to be room for improvement. There definitely is room to improve for this unit. But, like, I think everybody on that starting offensive line is a 4th-year college player or older. Like, that's absolutely insane. That's how teams win championships, from offensive lines that are senior-led. I love that Drew Shelton got a lot of run. I love that Vega got a lot of run. I think it was just a really solid outing. There's a ton of room for improvement. You know, you're not going to win the Joe Moore Award with that kind of outing. But again, it's baby steps to build this offensive line under Phil Trautwein. They took another step forward in this kind of game. And I'm excited to see where they are, you know, when October 3rd rolls around. So it was just a really good first step. You know, snaps got to get down. Communication's only going to get better. And it's just a really, I think overall, a pretty solid outing for that crew.
Yeah, there was one fun moment. I don't remember which pass it was, but Vega was in at right guard, and West Virginia brought like a bit of a delayed blitz. And the guy, I think Vega wasn't expecting it, and whoever the blitzer was just like shoved him or like bumped right into him, and he just fell straight backwards and like sat down. It was funny. Fortunately, it wasn't anything like terrible, but it was one of those reminders that like there are things that need to be ironed out that will be corrected over the coming weeks. And speaking of things that need to be ironed, Matt, let's talk about clothing. Let's talk about Home Field Apparel. Yes, the pod's longtime sponsor. Home Field Apparel, if you are a longtime listener of the pod, you assuredly know what they are. If you are a new listener of the pod, this is the first time you've ever listened, 1, thank you for listening to us. Please continue to do that. 2, Home Field Apparel, premium collegiate apparel brand based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. They are Hoosiers. They watched IU play against Ohio State and maybe expose a few things with the old Buckeyes. But regardless, Home Field Apparel is, again, premium collegiate apparel brand. They make really great stuff, whether it's T-shirts, whether it's sweatshirts, whether it's sweatpants, whether it's quarter zips, whether it's crew necks. There is so much stuff in Home Field's arsenal of attire that is good for you as a college sports fan, whether it's for your alma mater, whether you're like me and you get a bunch of Penn State stuff because you went to Penn State, or you're like friends of mine who are interested in other schools and want to consistently learn about other schools and want to know about traditions in other schools. Getting gear from Home Field Apparel is a great way to do that. If you would like to get your hands on some stuff from Home Field Apparel, I would recommend using the promo code RLR23 for 15% off of your first order if you are a new customer. Again, if you are a new customer at Home Field Apparel, use the promo code RLR23 for 15% off of your first order. Thank you again to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring the pod. Thank you always to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring the pod. And now let's get back to talking Hoosier. Let's get back to talking about teams that aren't the Indiana Hoosiers, namely the Penn State Nittany Lions. And let's move to the defensive side of the ball.
West Virginia. Many teams aren't Indiana.
That's right. West Virginia scored 15 points, 308 yards total offense, 162 passing, 146 rushing. Matt, let's start by starting with what stood out to you in a positive way? Was there any specific thing with Penn State's performance on defense that left you really encouraged?
They played better than they did in the opener last year. Like, I know that Aiden O'Connell was probably a better quarterback than Garrett Green. You know, he was a sixth-year guy at the time, and the game was on the road. But they gave up 31 points to Purdue last year in the opener, only giving up 15, and, like, 7 of them came on a busted coverage where Dom DeLuca kind of got lost in space, and then 8 of them came in garbage time when the game was out of hand. It was a pretty boring game. Like, I think Penn State got maybe 3 sacks, and they were not, like, exciting sacks. There were no turnovers, which I was kind of surprised by. It was just a boring game. But, again, to watch Penn State play a pretty boring game defensively and still deliver was pretty exciting. I thought Jalen Reed played outstanding. I think he, he's a better player than I think I was giving him credit for. I really liked what he was able to provide. And, overall, we'll get into bad stuff in a little bit, but it was a sleepy game for the Penn State defense, I thought, overall. They didn't impose their will, by any means. But, again, anytime you give up 15 points in a season opener to a Power 5 team, that's a pretty decent day at the office, I think.
Yeah, and I think that what made this game so unique is that West Virginia is, in theory, the kind of team that is supposed to give Penn State's defense trouble. Mm-hmm. It is a big, physical, really good offensive line. I thought West Virginia's offensive line played a really good game, all things considered.
Frazier's a day 1 draft pick.
I
feel really confident that center's a day 1 draft pick. That dude can ball.
I don't know if he'll go day 1 just because of his position,
right.
But I think he is a good chance of being the first center taken. Like, he is, Jason Kelsey-esque. Yeah. They kept running on 4th and 1s, the exact 4th and 1 play that the Eagles run, mm-hmm. where it's someone comes in motion, gets right behind the quarterback, you just get behind that center, he pushes forward, you fall over the top of him, you're getting the first down every time. But they went up against a very, very good offensive line, one that generally kept them at bay on the day. Week 1, always going to be a little bit difficult, always going to be a little bit tricky. And I thought we'll get to concerns in a second. Penn State's defensive backfield didn't really have to do too terribly much because of how West Virginia threw the football. Garrett Green, 16 for 27, 162 yards. They had a 37-yard on that yard gain on that busted coverage to former future Penn Stater Devin Carter. And then otherwise, there just wasn't much going on in that passing game. There were a few moments where I thought the defensive backfield gave guys space, maybe got bailed out a bit, but generally just a sleepy game for them. Mm-hmm. The big thing for me, I didn't think Penn State's run defense played especially well. I did, gap control wasn't necessarily there, over pursuing.
Tackling.
The stuff was sloppy. And I think there's inherently a concern, Matt, when it's the stuff that stuck out in that game against Michigan, where they just got steamrolled. And it's stuff that they need to fix, stuff they need to iron out. But here are the 4 things that I am going to say. 1, first game, obviously, as we've mentioned, is just a difficult game. 2, top 2 or 3 offensive line they're facing this entire season. And then the two important things to me. C.J. Donaldson, 18 carries, 81 yards, 1 touchdown. He was a guy who, as a true freshman, converted tight end to running back last season, averaged 6 yards a carry. He went for 4.5 against Penn State. Garrett Green, he got his yards on a lot of stuff where things broke down in the passing game and he had to improvise, and then he went out. He wasn't necessarily going out there running around like Pat White, we'll say. And then the most important thing to me, their only touchdown drive that came when it wasn't in garbage time and it wasn't already decided was when they took advantage of a busted coverage because the former walk-on linebacker who recently got put on scholarship was in the game and just had a bit of a miscommunication, which is obviously not a knock on Dom DeLuca. I think he's going to be an important player for the team this year. Had a nice game, I thought, outside of that. For how easy, Matt, I think it was to point out this is a concern, this is a concern, this is a concern, this is a concern. You go off of points, you go off of rushing yards per play in the rushing game, and Penn State had a really, really good game, even if I agree it didn't always feel like that.
Yeah, I think we're going to have these battle scars of the Michigan game until, we get rid of the demons. I think there's no other way to look at it. Like, that's always going to be something we're going to be monitoring because of how glaring it was. Again, in week 1, I'm not that concerned, and especially because very few teams are that dominant with their interior offensive line. Like, that guard center guard unit for West Virginia is probably the best interior offensive line Penn State is going to face all season. And Penn State was down Keziah Izzard, probably a starter for the majority of this season he'll end up being. So, when you take that into account, again, they never really allowed the big run, which is what gashed Penn State a lot of last year in that Michigan game. They kept guys in check. Garrett Green, I'll give him, I was really impressed with that dude. Tiny dude, took care of the ball, knew when it was time to take off. That's an impressive skill, and I don't think very many quarterbacks are athletic enough to do what Garrett Green went out there and just did against Penn State yesterday. So definitely something we're going to continue to monitor. It wasn't the tone I was hoping they were going to come out there on from the defensive tackle position, but it didn't really cost them anything. It's game 1. They're going to get better, and somebody at some point is going to step up and make a big play from that interior spot. No doubt about it for me.
Yeah, I think their front seven, other than I thought Curtis Jacobs had a really, really impactful football game.
Quiet,
yeah, 10 tackles,
very
1 sack,
quiet
1
10
tackle
tackles,
for
I
loss.
thought.
I think one thing that certainly hurt kind of the perception was the fact that there just weren't a ton of big plays, really destructive plays by Penn State's defense.
There weren't
3 sacks,
7-yard losses. They were all 2-yard losses, which is the weird part.
Yeah. 3 sacks. One of them, Dom DeLuca's sack actually was when Green basically just gave himself up, and DeLuca, as he was going to the ground, I think got his hands on him. There was that. Penn State 6 tackles for loss. Like you mentioned, none of them came from their interior defensive line guys, which is going to make people feel a little bit queasy. But while it was a concern, I think, I do think this is a concern. I do think this is something that Penn State is going to need to show as the season goes on. It is getting better at for when that game against Michigan specifically rolls around. I think if you didn't watch the game and you just went off of the context of 6 yards per completion, 3.7 yards per attempt, you probably end up feeling a little bit better about things. Any other big, broad, overarching thoughts on the defense, or do you want to move? Well, you don't want to talk about the special teams, but we should probably talk about the special teams.
Yeah, nothing else really for me. I'm curious to see how this group continues to evolve. Feels like they found their stride around game 3, that Auburn game. They figured things out, so that's kind of my benchmark for when I'll start having feeling comfortable making more informed statements about that unit.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Once they get to Illinois and Iowa, I don't think Illinois is especially good. I don't think.
Why did something happen last night, Bill?
Well, you see, they barely survived against the mighty Rockets of Toledo.
But
yeah, 374 yards for the Illini against mighty Toledo. So yeah, we'll see more and more as the year goes on. The schedule does set up really nicely for the defense to grow into this season, especially with Northwestern by UMass before the Ohio State game. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. One actual big concern, Matt, Penn State's special teams situation. While Penn State Gabe Nwosu had a really good game on kickoffs. I think every single one of his kickoffs went out of the back of the end zone, which is great to see.
Yep.
Penn State made every PAT that it had. Alex Felkins went 3 for 3. Sanders Zaheda went 2 for 2. Return game just wasn't a ton there for them. I don't care too terribly much about the return game. Nick Singleton was able to had 1 kickoff return from 19 yards. Caden Saunders, 1 punt return for -2 yards. nothing crazy there.
Yeah.
When it came to the kicking of the football, Sanders Sahaydak 0 for 2 on field goals. Alex Felkins did come in and make one. Riley Thompson, a pair of punts. One went 46 yards. One, I believe, went 29 yards. This was the thing going into the season where we basically said this was the biggest concern on Penn State's roster, Matt. I don't think we feel any better about things after one game. And if anything, I wouldn't blame someone for feeling a little bit worse.
No, but this is the game to have this happen in. This is when
Sure.
you don't want to know that maybe a guy isn't ready for it in game 4. You want it in game 1 when you're controlling the pace of play, when you're controlling how the actual game is being played. You're controlling the game state if you're Penn State. So you never want to see a guy miss. I feel really bad for Sander. I really do think that that's a lot of just God-given leg talent that he just has to work some things through, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's what Alex Felkins is here for. This is an Ivy League grad who's coming in and delivered. I love the fact that he got his shot. I think Sanders definitely not going to go away. I think Sahaydak can still be an asset for this team. But now we know that when the lights are brightest, it's a bit of a different scenario than charting kicks in practice. We knew this going into the year. And now we know who maybe the most sure bet is to connect on those kind of field goals. If you got to kick one from 57 yards out, you probably go with Sahaydak. You try your luck. But maybe it's similar to what they did with Pinniger and Stout, where it was 42 and in, it was Pinniger, 43 and out, it was Stout. Maybe you do something like that. This is going to keep on evolving. None of us are kicking experts. We just know that. Listen, one guy connected on every single one he went out there and tried. One guy didn't. You should probably go with the one who made his kicks.
Yeah. I mean, it was unfortunate seeing that second miss in particular.
Was tough.
Yeah, if he just missed his first one, which was lefty on the right hash, came around on it a little too much. Like, I think you can write that off if he makes his second one. But the fact that that was a straight-on shot and he pulled it in the same exact manner to the same exact spot as his first one, that's a bit of a concern. Yeah. Again, coming into this season, this was something that we were all worried about. Mm-hmm. And one game amplified it a little bit. It's still a thing that they're going to have to work on in practice and come into games. The punting situation, I mean...
Don't punt.
There's not much to say there. Yeah, I mean, you could just not punt and never have to worry about this. But Riley Thompson, his first game, only punted twice. The second one was much better than the first one. Their only return went for 4 yards, so that's a nice thing. But are you sitting here like thinking ahead to Ohio State, Michigan, whatever other big games there are, and like getting a little bit of the agita because you're thinking about, if this comes down to a field goal, if this comes down to having to pin them deep, Penn State's going to be in a tough spot?
Yeah, naturally. But again, I don't think if Penn State loses to Michigan and Ohio State again, I don't think it's going to be because of one thing. Like, I think it'll be multiple things that eventually led to that. I want to make sure I call out Dzansky snapped well and Riley Thompson held well.
Yeah.
We'll find positives where we can find them for this unit. And again, it was game 1. It was the first time under the lights. I am a little bit nervous that, if the game comes down to a field goal, could easily get in somebody's head. If Thompson has to have a big punt to set the Ohio State defense back, or the Ohio State offense back, and really set up the defense for success, I don't feel confident just yet he can do that. But again, it's such a small intake of data we have right now that I can't sit here and confidently say that I won't feel completely different about this by the time the month's over. This could just be a one-game jitters thing. I don't think it is, but I just don't know enough yet to really know that this is going to be the roller coaster that we're expecting it to be as things stand right now.
Yeah, and then obviously, like we mentioned, Alex Felkins comes out, makes the last kick of the game. Penn State then goes, puts its twos in. Fun quote after the game from West Virginia coach Neil Brown when he was asked if he had a problem with Penn State trying to score with its twos. This is from Chris Anderson of EAR Sports. Nah, who cares? Brown responded. I took the timeouts. When further pressed if he had a problem with it, Brown added more. I wouldn't have done it, but it doesn't bother me, he said. Stuff like that, what comes around goes around. At some point, it'll come back around. I don't know when. It doesn't bother me. I'm not upset about it. One, he sounds pretty upset about it. Two, Matt, what did you think? Was there any bit of you that was like, I don't like that Penn State put in its second team offense and is not treating them with baby gloves here? Or were you like, or do you think this is just like ridiculous?
There's no preseason in college. If you want to get game reps, these are the game reps that your guys are going to be able to get, especially if they're in the second and third teams. I'm sorry, it sucks, but with the with the invention of the playoff, how you win matters. Even just a little bit, how you win matters. I think it just helps that Penn State was out there and was able to just cover the spread, and also you got reps for your twos, and you gave them like a full leash. Like you let them actually run the offense like they would in a real game. And in a sport where there's no preseason, those reps are invaluable. So it sucks. Like I feel bad for the kids in West Virginia. Like that's never fun. But at the same time, like I don't know, Neil Brown, you make a lot of money, figure it out and stop it.
Yeah, I am a firm believer that the most patronizing thing that a football team could do is go, oh, well, we're just beating you so badly that we're going to pat you on the head and stop trying because we don't want to hurt your feelings.
Right.
Like, I think that sucks. At the same time, the drive where Penn State scored with its backups, where Penn State's plays were Trey Potts run, Bo Prabula run, Trey Potts run, Bo Prabula run, Trey Potts run, Bo Prabula pass, Trey Potts run, Bo Prabula run. This came after West Virginia scored and then attempted an onside kick that gave Penn State the ball at West Virginia's 46. If you want Penn State to stop playing, you should also stop playing. And you should not be upset if Penn State, with its backups in, with the guys who aren't the ones that have whooped your ass for the 57 minutes leading up to this, then come in, they bring the backups in and they take it easy on you by just running the football over and over. Yeah. So I think this is a non-story. I wanted to address it because I think this is like the lamest thing in the world when people complain about how it's not classy to keep trying to play football. But yeah, let's move on to game balls, Matt. Offensive game ball, defensive game ball. Who's getting your offensive game ball? I think I know.
I know who you're going to go with, but so I'm going to give mine to Drew. First start, this was about as good as I could have ever hoped for. Really excited for the kid. I think he's going to be excellent. Honorable mention to me to Caden Wallace. I think he really stepped up, and I think that's a good first step in what I hope is going to be a big-time narrative-altering season. But game ball goes to Drew.
Yeah, for me it has to go to Drew. I mean, I think he had about as good of a debut as he could have. And I think that the thing that confirms this is that people went into this season talking about how important Drew Allar was to Penn State's hopes of getting above and beyond. And after his first game, those same people are talking about how that performance by Drew Allar was the thing they were looking for. Mm-hmm. And I think to meet and possibly even exceed expectations the way that he did means that you have to give it to him. So I give my one on the offensive side of the ball to Drew Allar. Defense, who do you give it to?
Jalen Reed. I really do think he's flying around. He played a ton of snaps. Guy who was hurt in the Rose Bowl. I really like what he gave them. I kind of viewed him as the forgotten guy, I think, because Keaton Ellis is a team captain. KJ Winston's the young guy we're all excited about. Zakee Wheatley is a turnover machine. And Reed kind of felt like the odd man out. He had a great quote this offseason where he changed his number to number 1 to play more like Jaquan Brisker. He was Brisker-esque. He was flying around, man. He was bringing down dudes who were a lot bigger than him. Specifically a check down, I believe, like 3rd and 12, where Garrett Green threw it to his tight end in the flat. And Jalen Reed, who's not over 6 foot, no way, just goes in there and brings him down on his own without anybody's help. I think he played a much better game than I was expecting. Finished with 4 tackles, all 4 of them. Is that correct? Hold on. Let me make sure I can read. I don't have my glasses on. This is great audio content. I literally just had it. Jalen, yeah. 4
Reed, 4 tackles, 3 solo.
Yeah,
yes.
4 tackles and they were solo. So we love to see that.
Yeah, I'm going to give mine to Curtis Jacobs. He was a guy who, you know, we did our podcast earlier this week. And we were talking about who the under the radar guy is on Penn State's defense. I said Curtis Jacobs, and it was because I think he has the ability to do this. And he came out and he did the damn thing. 10 tackles, 7 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, just kind of flying around. He had a big game on a day where Abdul Carter did not play up to the standard that Abdul Carter has set for himself. And I think that was a really big thing. I think Penn State needed that little bit of bite in the middle of its defense. Curtis Jacobs was able to provide that. He provided it in a big way. And, you know, there's going to be a game where Carter had a bad first game by his standards. He's going to get right. And when he gets right, if Curtis Jacobs can do that while Abdul Carter does Abdul Carter stuff, and Kobe King, could be just a steady presence in the middle of Penn State's defense, no one is going to like playing against them.
No.
So I got to go with Curtis Jacobs.
Great pick.
Yeah. Let's end just something a little bit fun. And this could be Penn State or otherwise. But a fun thing about college football is seeing something that happens in week 1 and totally overreacting to it, only to then end up being completely wrong. So whether it's Penn State, whether it's otherwise, Matt, what's a thing you want to overreact to week 1?
Single-digit win Ohio State. It's my overreaction. I'll give a Penn State one. We won't talk about Ohio State in a Penn State podcast, unless you want me to, lay into Ryan Day and that offense not looking that good. Listen, all I'm saying is when James Franklin had day 3 NFL talent, he won 11 games in a Rose Bowl. When Ryan Day doesn't have top 15 talent, they score fewer points than Iowa. That's facts. But from the Penn State perspective, the thing I'm going to overreact to is probably Drew Allar. Like, I'll be honest, I probably am overreacting to how good he looked. Because, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, let's send him to New York already. There's going to be baby steps. There's going to be a lot of mistakes. This is like the highest high you can start out with. And I think that, not that I don't think Allar's going to be excellent. I picked him to be second team All Big Ten. But I think I might be overreacting to how good he looked in game 1.
That's fair. And mine is actually kind of related to what your first one with Ohio State. I think after one game, I think Penn State's the likelihood Penn State beats Michigan went down. I know it was against East Carolina, but I thought J.J. McCarthy looked like he was in just total control, total command of the offensive side of the football. Blake Corum looked good for his first game back from a knee issue. Their defense looked very good. Their receivers looked very good. Everyone on Michigan looked awesome.
But Bill,
counterpoint East Carolina.
They were so motivated in honor of their fallen head coach.
For sure.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Their fallen head coach of the school suspended. Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Who can coach them during the week? That was like, they're like free Harbaugh. I'm like, dude, you probably saw him yesterday and you're going to see him today. What are you talking about? That was insane.
I would love to show that to someone who doesn't know anything about sports and just say, like, what do you think is going on here? Because they would easily say either 1, he died, 2, he was arrested, or 3, he was fired without cause for something that he didn't do. Regardless,
he bought cheeseburgers.
The other side,
instead, what an idiot.
The other side of that is week 1 overreaction. I feel a lot better about Penn State going into Columbus and picking up a win. I thought Ohio State's defense looked sensational against Indiana, and obviously Indiana's offense isn't exactly going to light the world on fire. But I always thought Ohio State's defense was going to be really, really good this season, going to take a step forward from last year. Ohio State's offense, 380 total yards, okay. 143 rushing yards, 23 total points, 237 passing yards, 2 for 12 on third down. Kyle McCord, when he was able to just stand there and rip it without worrying too much, he looked fine, potentially even like pretty solid. But Ohio State's offensive line is just not good.
Are they afraid to let Devin Brown throw? Like, this seems like such a made-up competition, dude. He threw it one time for -2 yards. Like, what is that?
Well, Ryan Day had some quote about, like, we didn't want – like, we're trying to get the offense into a rhythm. We're not trying to, like We don't want to rotate over and over. Go with this guy here, just constantly going back. I think he wanted to give Kyle McCord a chance to find something, and just didn't necessarily do that. But yeah, if Penn State, if these issues still exist for Ohio State by the time Penn State comes to town, Penn State's edge rushers are going to get home on Kyle McCord or Devin Brown or whoever it is. And it's going to come down to whether or not Penn State's offense is able to put up points on Ohio State's defense. And it'll be tough, but I do feel a little bit better. I would still pick Ohio State to win because I assume Ohio State is going to look better in the month and a half before then. God knows what that game against Notre Dame in South Bend is going to look like for them.
What a bummer the whiteouts at the exact same time. That's going to be a lot of channel flipping.
I wouldn't call it a bummer, but I will have it just on my phone, looking down at it like that. But yeah, it'll be fun. I think Penn State is going to looks like a team that could beat Ohio State, but other side of it, Michigan looked a little bit better than I thought they were going to look. So that's all. Is there are any final thoughts before we wrap things up and send the people on to their Monday or Tuesday or whatever day they're listening to this?
No, overall not terrible day for the Big Ten. It would have been cool if Northwestern beat Rutgers, and as we start to monitor that maybe potential 11-1 tie situation, that would have been a nice win. Overall just a really fun day. Glad college football's back. Looks like a pretty light weekend next weekend. I don't think there's any conference games, so excited to. The biggest step always comes between game 1 and game 2. So excited to see what a lot of these teams look like now. It's also weird that Penn State goes from Power 5 to FCS opponent when most other schools are going the opposite way. So space on monitoring.
There is one very notable Big Ten game next weekend. I can't believe you.
Is it Washington, Michigan State?
You can think. Oh no.
What Big Ten game is next weekend?
Coach Prime, baby.
Oh, that's not Big Ten.
Involving a Big Ten team. Yeah, I apologize. But yeah, I'm still not convinced Colorado is excellent. I think they're probably going to be fun. I think they might run into some problems as the year goes on, but I think they're going to unleash the wrath of God on them.
They're going to be so fun to watch. That is a made-for-TV football team, and I'm glad that I get to watch them again next week.
Yeah, I mean, at Oregon, USC, Oregon State, at Utah on the schedule, at UCLA. There's some not fun games on the schedule, but I think every single one of their games is going to be a banger. So
yes, sir.
At least there's that.
Agreed.
But yeah, I think that's it for this edition of the podcast. Thank you, everyone, as always, for listening. Make sure you subscribe wherever you go and get your podcast. If you use Apple Podcasts, please go and leave us a 5-star review. It does help with the algorithm and all those fun things that Apple doesn't tell anyone about. If you're over on YouTube, watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the pod, like the pod, hop into the comment section, be nice to people over there. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at RLRblog. And as always, thank you to Home Field Apparel. One last time, use the promo code RLR23 for 15% off of your first order if you're a new customer. One last time, thank you everyone for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. For Matt Filipovitz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.
Go State.